We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators.
No. Look, I would take
her over it.
It's
horrible that we have to do that.
I can't. I could never vote for Newsom. I just can't. I would just say that his leadership in California is good reason to brush him off for the loser that he really is.
Gavin Newsom thought he was strolling into a routine day of polished politics, where the cameras love him, the lights flatter him, and the hair gel does half the talking. He probably practiced the smile in the mirror, the kind that says, "I'm everyone's favorite governor," while secretly whispering, "I'm also auditioning for the White House." But then came Ana Kasparian, not with a whisper, not with a whimper, but with a sledgehammer disguised as reason.
Pipes and hand them out at Skid Row. There is video evidence of that, paying incredibly high taxes that go to what? So yeah, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. And honestly, just experiencing what I've seen on the ground in California has made me question a lot about left-wing
A blowtorch fueled by receipts, and a calmness so sharp it made his entire political brand wobble like a cheap IKEA table under too much weight. This wasn't banter. This wasn't a spirited back and forth. This was a demolition job that left Gavin's PR team somewhere in a corner, asking Siri how to fake amnesia. One minute he's basking in the glow of carefully curated applause. The next minute he's wondering if LinkedIn has an option for recovering politician.
In 2014, voters in California overwhelmingly supported a ballot measure to support building more reservoirs in the state in order to bulk up our water infrastructure because we live in a drought-prone state. That passed in 2014. Funding was attached to it. You want to know how many reservoirs have been built since 2014? Zero. This state is an utter joke because of the people who are governing it. Gavin Newsom right now is at the top of that list.
And the part that stung the most? Ana didn't even raise her voice. She didn't need theatrics. No screaming, no angry fists slamming podiums. Just facts, clarity, and the type of rhetorical scalpel that doesn't just cut, it dissects. Gavin walked in thinking this was another press pit stop. What he got instead was the roast he never signed up for but absolutely deserved. Now let's be real. Gavin Newsom has built an entire career out of image.
This is what I was surprised about. I did not expect Donald Trump to flip 10 counties in California from blue to red. But I guess I shouldn't have been surprised about that either. Because when you look at the conditions that people are living in a Democrat-controlled state, well, yeah, you can understand why people are turning their backs on the Democratic Party. You can understand why people are frustrated at the corruption, at the loss of $24 billion that was allocated to help the homeless, when homelessness only exploded during that time, and that money is now unaccounted for.
He's the West Coast poster boy who can sip wine at Napa Valley fundraisers while talking about climate change as though the wildfires aren't creeping toward his vineyard views. He's the self-styled progressive warrior who loves MSNBC airtime, who can drop equity and justice into a sentence like confetti at a campaign rally.
What would a President Newsom candidacy look like in a general election, not just pandering to the left?
Yeah, good question. He would sell out the American people to corporate interests, just like he did with PG&E, starting fires and destroying countless Californians' lives as a result of that. He bailed them out. He totally bailed them out. He has provided protection for them, even though they absolutely refused to update their century-year-old equipment, which everyone knew was going to lead to devastating wildfires.
But when you peel away the buzzwords and the polished Instagram moments, what's left looks less like leadership and more like political cosplay. Because for every fiery speech about green energy, there's a stack of oil drilling permits signed quietly under the radar. For every photo op with the homeless, there's a conveniently delayed policy that somehow evaporates once the cameras stop rolling. And Ana Kasparian wasn't just calling him out on policies, she was torching the whole performance. She dragged the facade into the sunlight, ripped the progressive costume off the mannequin, and forced everyone watching to confront what's been obvious for years. Gavin's brand is shinier than his record.
Gavin Newsom, in every single interview I've seen him do, has passed the buck, even though he is the governor of this state.
Yeah.
He is pathetic. He's a snake. He's like the slimiest Democratic politician, certainly on a local level. But what we have seen is mismanagement of epic proportions, and the mere existence, and it is real, the existence of climate change should not be utilized as a talking point in order to pass the buck, in order to deflect blame, in order to refuse to take any personal responsibility for how poorly this state has been governed for several years now.
What made Ana's takedown brutal wasn't anger, it was precision. She didn't shout about hypocrisy, she calmly illustrated it. She didn't rant about betrayal, she methodically listed receipts, each one sharper than the last. It was like watching a magician reveal every trick. Here's the smoke machine, here's the mirror, here's the hidden trapdoor. Suddenly, every Gavin promise looked less like vision and more like misdirection. You could almost hear Californians nodding in unison, the collective, "Wait a second, she's right." Because this wasn't just about Gavin. It was about every politician who campaigns like a reformer and governs like a hedge fund manager. Every leader who talks about the people like they're background props.
Can I curse? I don't know if I can.
Please,
Okay.
you must. It's a necessity.
So, Democratic establishment candidates are full of shit. And I need people to understand that. And we need to get out of this like vicious pendulum swing cycle where we go from one terrible administration to another terrible administration. They just have different branding. But in the end, they do nothing for ordinary people. And that's what people are hungry for. I think that's part of what explains the popularity of Zoran Mamdani in this mayoral race in New York City.
A Netflix trailer. Ana lit the match, and everyone suddenly realized they'd been sitting on political kindling stacked higher than Gavin's ambition. And what did Gavin do in response? Nothing. Silence. Not even a panicked late-night tweet. Not a hastily crafted press release typed up by interns on Red Bull. Not a staged photo of him hugging a puppy to reset the narrative. Just silence. The kind that doesn't feel like dignity but like being cornered. And in politics, silence doesn't protect you, it amplifies the blow. The clips of Ana's dismantling went viral faster than one of Gavin's hair flips in slow motion. Twitter memes popped up. TikTok had remixes. Reddit threads turned her quotes into slogans. Political commentators who normally play safe couldn't resist. Even people who had barely followed California politics suddenly found themselves glued to a takedown so surgical it could have been broadcast from an operating room. But here's the deeper cut. Gavin Newsom wasn't just exposed as a hypocrite. He was exposed as a political coward. Because as Ana pointed out, leadership isn't waiting for polls to tell you what your morals should be. Leadership isn't calculating donor reactions before deciding if housing is a right or a soundbite. Leadership is conviction, and Gavin's brand of leadership looks more like a waiting game. Wait for the winds to shift, wait for the headlines, wait for billionaires to whisper approval. Then, and only then, does he act. That's not leadership, it's survival theater. And when someone like Ana drags that truth into daylight, there's no escape hatch. Gavin didn't just look weak. He looked exposed. It's worth pausing on just how devastating the aesthetic contrast was. Gavin is the Hollywood governor, the man who looks like he was born wearing a tailored suit. The guy who seems to believe that every camera loves him because he's framed his entire existence around being photogenic. But Ana isn't dazzled by jawlines and perfect hair. She didn't argue with his image. She ignored it entirely and focused on the emptiness underneath. It was like peeling away a glossy magazine cover to find blank pages. She reminded everyone that California's homelessness crisis isn't solved by good lighting, that climate justice doesn't come from Napa speeches, and that no amount of diversity photo ops can replace actual equity policies. The contradiction was brutal. A governor posing as progressive savior while governing like a cautious centrist more concerned with donor brunches than breadlines, and Californians felt it. Because this wasn't just about political theory, it was about lived experience. It was about families priced out of their own neighborhoods while Gavin boasts about prosperity. It was about workers who hear promises of protections while permits for polluting industries slide through back channels. It was about students stuck in debt while billionaires get tax incentives dressed up as innovation. Ana voiced what many already knew. Gavin's politics are tailored not for progressives, not for people, but for power brokers. And no amount of campaign polish can disguise that forever. The internet's reaction wasn't just entertainment, it was catharsis. People who felt ignored finally saw someone articulate the frustration with clarity and bite. The memes weren't just jokes, they were pressure valves for collective anger. Reddit threads didn't just laugh, they dissected, debated, and amplified. And Gavin's silence made it worse. Because in the digital age, silence isn't neutral. It's surrender. When you can't clap back, when you can't defend, when you can't even spin, you've already lost the narrative. Gavin lost it the second Ana spoke, and every replay, every remix, every reaction made the loss permanent. And here's the real kicker. Gavin's not just any governor. He's been grooming himself for the national stage, the presidential runway, the inevitable step from California's glittering stage to the White House spotlight. He's got the ambition, the donor network, the polished rhetoric, but after Ana's takedown, those aspirations looked less like destiny and more like delusion. Because progressives, the very base he's been wooing with sound bites, just watched one of their own torch him for failing to walk the talk. The damage wasn't just local, it was national. The echo didn't just hit Sacramento, it ricocheted across the Democratic Party. Suddenly, the golden boy looked tarnished, and no amount of hair gel can fix that. Ana's credibility made it worse. She isn't some outsider hurling stones from the cheap seats. She knows the playbook. She's been paying attention. She's lived the issues Gavin only performs, which is why her critique landed so hard. It wasn't abstract. It was personal, lived, undeniable. When she called out his hypocrisy, it wasn't theater, it was accountability. And that's why it resonated. Because in an era where political branding often trumps political substance, someone calmly dismantling the brand is more radical than any fiery speech.
And now some are noticing, look, he's not really doing the type of campaigning for Kamala Harris that he was doing for Joe Biden. What's going on here? Now, of course, we all know what's going on. Newsom was engaging in that campaigning, not for Joe Biden's sake, but in order to increase his name recognition in case he found himself in a situation where he'd be tapped to replace Joe Biden after he drops out. Now, Newsom went from campaigning hard for Biden to barely campaigning at all on behalf of Kamala Harris, so much so that Democratic operatives are now questioning whether his role as a national surrogate for Harris is really something they can lean on. They're questioning if it's even a thing.
And that's what Gavin underestimated. He thought politics was still about optics, that if you looked the part long enough, substance could be faked. But in an age of viral receipts, real-time fact checks, and audiences trained to sniff out hypocrisy faster than PR teams can cover it, optics don't save you. If anything, optics make you a bigger target. Because when the gap between image and reality grows too wide, it doesn't take much for someone like Ana to drive a bulldozer straight through it. And once that gap is exposed, no slogan, no photo shoot, no well-lit speech can close it again. So where does this leave Gavin? He'll survive, of course. Politicians always do. The machinery of power is built to withstand humiliation. His career isn't over, but his image, his most prized possession, took a blow that will haunt him. Every time he steps to a mic, that smirk will feel thinner, that charm less convincing. Because people will remember. They'll remember the day Ana Kasparian put his brand on trial and convicted him of being a performative progressive. No jury deliberation, no appeals. Just a verdict delivered in real time with the internet as the courtroom. And Ana, she reminded everyone what accountability sounds like. It's not dramatic. It's not noisy. It's not choreographed. It's sharp, it's calm, it's merciless in its clarity. It's the voice that cuts through the noise, the checkmate move in a game Gavin thought he was winning. She didn't just drag him. She exposed the entire ecosystem of performative politics that props up leaders like him. She called us back to demand better. Leaders who don't just look progressive but act progressive. Who don't just campaign on equity but deliver it. So next time Gavin flashes that smile, next time he adjusts the tie and leans into the mic, maybe he'll hesitate. Maybe he'll remember that image doesn't outrun substance, that branding doesn't erase betrayal, that silence doesn't shield from accountability. Because no matter how polished the speech, no matter how perfect the hair, no matter how carefully staged the moment, the truth always finds a mic. And this time, its name was Ana Kasparian.